Okay. So now the challenge of the sutta we're going to look at right now for many of you will be to come to it with fresh eyes, because you've heard about these 5 reflections before, and we're going to try to really see the depth of them and how this helps us free ourselves from this illusion of self. So this is called themes, and this is from the Anguttara Nikaya. This is the translation from Bhikkhu Bodhi, and I'm not sure, you probably can't find the same translation on Sutta Central, but Bhante Sujato's is also good. And it can be interesting looking at different translations because they'll bring out slightly different nuances depending on the words that the translator chooses. Themes. Bhikkhus, there are these 5 themes that should often be reflected upon by a woman or a man, by a householder or one gone forth. What 5? So one of the beautiful things about this sutta is that it includes everyone. And I do believe that if the Buddha lived now, he would probably not talk in a binary gender way, but to really think of this being something for all of us, every human being, whether you're a householder or a monastic or whatever your gender. So here are the 5. A woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I'm subject to old age. I'm not exempt from old age. Regardless of how old we are, reflecting on this is important. We're going to see these again a couple more times. So I'm just going to kind of read through them the first time, and then we'll talk more about deepening our reflections on this. A woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I am subject to illness. I'm not exempt from illness. A woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I am subject to death. I am not exempt from death. A woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus: I must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. Or in our chanting book, I think it's all that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. A woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect: I am the owner of my Coma, the heir of my Coma. I have Coma as my origin, Coma as my relative, Coma as my resort, and I will be the heir of whatever Coma, good or bad, that I do. So, as we look at this, before I go on to when he talks about why should we reflect on this, just thinking about reflecting on aging. I think for many of us, we don't think a lot about it when we're young. And it seems to be the circumstance where you get suddenly, it's like everything kind of goes along and suddenly you're old. Suddenly you realize, whoa, so much of my life has gone by. I remember my mom saying, I never thought I'd get like this. And I think she was thinking about how hard it was for her to walk, or, different things like that after having been such a hiker and so active all her life. And, but her parents got like that. So what is it that causes us to think we're not going to get like that? Or, maybe when we're young, particularly, but maybe at any time, we might see someone who's old and be kind of repulsed by that. We don't want to be like that. We don't want aging. But one important thing to reflect on is that the aging is already inside of us, even as soon as we're born. It's going to happen. It's there already. And so we'll talk in a minute about, you can see a little bit at the bottom there, but we'll talk in a minute about the importance of this reflection. And it's not to be negative. Like another thing my mother used to say a lot to people is enjoy your young life. It's not to say that we shouldn't enjoy our young life or our middle life or our aged life, but it's to really see the truth and to not be shocked or appalled by it when it happens. And with illness also, illness is inside of us. It's already there. I mean, we walk around with this body all the time, and we don't know for sure what might be happening in there. Like I have a friend who just recently told me that she and 3 other women were really close. They came together living in Texas in a city, and then they all eventually moved to the Bay Area. They've been really close a long time, like from the time they were, students in school. And she said, all of the other 3 have cancer. She's the only one. She's, why don't I have cancer? And why so many of my very close friends, 3 out of the 4 of us, has cancer. And of course, they're all in different situations with it. And it's like, this is the nature of being a human being. This is the nature of having a human body. And to know that it's not that something's gone wrong, and that the real place to put our effort is in how we respond. And how about dying, death? We all know that's going to happen, but how much can our mind take it in? What has been our relationship to death so far? Are we ready for that? We'll talk more about that in a minute too. And then being parted from everything and everyone. It's inevitable. It's hard when we get to the end of our life and we haven't practiced letting go very much, because then we have to let go of everything at the same time. It can be very challenging and frightening and stressful. But if we practice ahead of time to understand what's really, that all of these things in our life aren't really ours in the first place, that we can love them and use them and appreciate them and let them go. And then this part about Coma, this is really what we do own. So the Buddhist training make it clear here. We don't know any of the material. We don't own anything material. It's not really ours, including our own bodies. Our status and our education and all the experiences we've had and all those things, we don't really own that either. But what really stays and comes along with us is the result of our actions. And the way it's said here, it can be kind of hard to maybe wrap our heads around. So what does it mean to be the heir of my Coma? It's like, because when we are reborn, that Coma from before comes and kind of completes the package. That's the imprint that we're still traveling on. That's our passport. That's our situation. And it's also what we can trust. So if we do good things, we can trust the good results. That's a side of it that we may not see right away, that we can depend upon it. So when the Buddha says, for the sake of what benefits should a woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, reflect on this? I'm subject to old age. I'm not exempt from old age. In their youth, beings are intoxicated with their youth. When they're intoxicated with their youth, they engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. But when one often reflects upon this theme, the intoxication with youth is either completely abandoned or diminished. It is for the sake of this benefit that you reflect this way. So what is that like, that intoxication of youth? Can you relate to that? Like you feel healthy and strong, maybe almost invincible. You can handle anything. Maybe you never felt that way. But maybe we have some idea that we're going to be able to do what we want, or we're going to be able to keep going without it, for a long time, virtually forever. The point is, we don't really think about aging. And we don't really think how much we're going to change. We don't really appreciate where we're at. Now, intoxication isn't just, it's a delusion state. It's not just like being happy and active or something like that. It's really not getting it and doing foolish things because of it. We waste a lot of time and we lose a lot of opportunities because we really haven't learned yet to be circumspect and appreciate the results of our actions. So this is the encouragement to really look at it. And we can look at how we relate to our aging, and regardless of where we are in this process. How do I relate to this? Am I able to let this body or watch this body or feel this body change without worry, without concern, without disappointment? That's really what helps us see how much kind of the delusion of self is wrapped around the body and a particular state that we want to have it in. And it's okay to have these thoughts and feelings of, I don't want to be old. I don't want to be limited more than what I'm used to being limited. And I don't want to have this ailment or whatever. But it's also there's the practice. Oh yeah, I remember. This is the way things actually are. This body does not belong to me. I can't make it be different. I can't make it stay young. How many stories are there in our mythology about the fountain of youth? How many people are actually invested in this, like freezing the body and waking it up again after we've found the solution to its problems. I don't think the Buddha would have thought that was very wise. Like, I guess, if we think this is the only life you have, it might be harder, but the Buddha was very clear that we come back again until we're finished with this and we really realize the whole thing. So reflecting on this and reflecting on that we can kind of step back from being so attached to this body staying young. And of course, the benefit of reflecting on being subject to illness is that we're not intoxicated with our good health. When we have health, that we're not intoxicated by it. And using that time of capability and health unwisely. Realizing that, this is a constantly fluctuating situation. You can be healthy and an hour later start to feel ill, or 10 minutes. And it also goes the other way, of course. And of course, we've been watching a lot of this even change, like during the pandemic, of the severity of illness, and how comfortable can we be with all of this? And I know I found for myself, there were times when I wasn't very comfortable at all. Of course, I wanted to be careful not to get sick, not to get COVID. And in part for myself, because I'd rather just be able to keep living my life in the way I am than have to pause and deal with that. I'd like to be able to stay out of the hospital, to be able to live longer, practice more, help people more. I'd like to not spread it to other people. But if it happens, then how will I be with it? Yeah, this is the nature of the body. This is already within me, this illness. It's going to come one way or another. And then death. Death contemplation is hugely valuable for letting go of who we think we are. If we really prepare for death in a way that, yeah, if it happens today, it's okay. And to really try to bring the mind to the reality that it could happen any minute, any time. And we can think, well, I'm really healthy. So this is one of the things my friend said about about all of her friends who have cancer, the three. They do exercise, they eat well, they do all the right things. She said, if any of them, any of us was the one who you would think would get sick, it would be me, because I don't do the right thing. and yet, we can think, oh, I haven't done this thing or that thing. I've taken good care of myself. And we still become ill. And of course, dying young. We might die any time in this life. You never know. I know someone whose 16-year-old son was playing basketball and he dropped dead on the basketball court. No warning, nothing wrong. And this happens. But can we be ready? Can we use this reflection as a way to really live life fully, without intoxication, doing good things. You know, like those mountains coming in. Buddha said, death is rolling in on us. If we really think about it, then we'll be virtuous. We'll do good things. We'll follow the Dhamma. Excuse me. I'm having a very interesting moment because sometimes I have a cardiac arrhythmia and it's really going wild right now. So if I keel over, try to use it for your reflection. No kidding. Okay. I must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to me. Why would we think about that? Beings have desire and lust in regard to those people and things that are dear and agreeable. And excited by this lust, they engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. But when one often reflects on this theme, the desire and lust in regard to everyone and everything dear and agreeable is either completely abandoned or diminished. What freedom! It's for this sake that we reflect on how we must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable to us. I hope you get the sense of how freeing this is rather than it being depressing. Maybe sometimes people go through a kind of phase of being kind of like, oh man, I don't want it to be like this. But then we have to realize, but it is like this. So, and the more we take this in, the more the Dhamma arises in us, because we're looking at things for real, the real deal. And then the Dhamma is there. And we feel more free, more happy. And finally, when we reflect on the fact that we own our own karma, that's what we inherit. That's what we spring from. That's what we're carrying. That's what we're related to. And that's where we take sort of comfort, really. That's our resort. That's what we rely on. It's not our refuge, but we exist based on this karma. Whatever good or bad we do, that's what we are engaged in. That's what we're dealing with. So when people engage in misconduct with body, speech, and mind because they don't reflect on this, but when we do reflect on it, such misconduct is either completely abandoned or diminished. Now, we're going to get to the really good part, I think. So this is where the person who's been reflecting on this kind of thing reacts differently when these things happen. And something different happens to us when we do this. And the Buddha says, this noble disciple, so because we're following the Dhamma, because we're reflecting on these truths, we become a noble disciple. Now, the suttas are chock full of descriptions of how the noble disciple acts and how the noble disciple thinks. And it's wonderful to look at those passages and to see, yeah, I can do that. And so the noble disciple thinks, I'm not the only one who's subject to old age. All beings come and go. All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, are subject to old age. None are exempt from old age. And when we reflect on this theme, the path is generated. That means that the path kind of becomes clear to us. This is another way of describing stream entry. This is enough, just reflecting on getting old, for us to have this realization. The path is generated, and then we pursue this path and develop it and cultivate it. And that brings us to a point where all of the fetters are entirely abandoned and all of the underlying tendencies are uprooted. Well, think about it. Just reflecting on the fact that you age can do that. That we can let go of the whole mess and awaken. That's our arahantship. That's pretty astounding, I think. Those fetters that are so obviously describing the self, the Sakaya Ditti, the conceit, the mana, those ones fall away, and so do the other 8. And then he says, this noble disciple reflects, I'm not the only one subject to illness, not exempt from illness. All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, are subject to illness. None are exempt. Reflecting on this often, the path is generated. So we can reflect on illness and have the same result. Complete awakening. Freedom from suffering and death. All beings that come and go, that pass away and undergo rebirth, are subject to death. You get born, you're subject to death, you're going to die. I don't mean subject, they don't say subject to as if it's a maybe still. It's not like it could happen. It's going to happen. But when we pursue this path and cultivate it, the fetters are completely abandoned. The underlying tendencies are uprooted. This reflection of I'm not the only one. This is a really good one to take in when this kind of thing actually really becomes a force in our mind, in our life, in our circumstance. I'm not the only one. This is how it is for all of us, any of us. We don't have exactly the same challenges or situations. We're not all going to die the same way. But you know, you've died so many times, you know how to do it. It's not that big a deal, really. It just looks like a big deal from where you're at right now, where we're at right, at least, you know, most of us, I think. It looks like a big deal. And when we reflect, I'm not the only one who must be parted and separated from everyone and everything dear and agreeable. All beings experience this. Actually, COVID has been quite the teacher because we've gotten a taste of some of this in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise. And the question is, can we really throw ourselves deep into the Dhamma? Open our minds, open our hearts to that, not wallow, not reflect, not be obsessed by what we can't do, but be interested in what we can do, in the ways that we can develop the mind. Because it's the development of the mind that really stays with us. We get down to the karma part again, and that's what really comes with us. That's what we carry along. That's what keeps going. When the body and the mind separate, and we're separated from everyone here, everything we had, these reflections really give us a firm grasp of how unhelpful, burdensome, unnecessary it is to gather a lot of material things. You know, having enough to be comfortable, having enough to be able to have some freedom for practice, for helping others, that's all good. But if a person's goal is to just amass wealth or power or influence, I guess that's kind of the same thing. When they get to the end, it's going to be horrible, miserable. There's nothing to base your security in. If that's all your goal is, it all goes away. And more than that, sometimes when people are so caught up in collecting, gathering, acquiring what's in the world, they start to do it with unwholesome means. So if you get to that point at the time of your death, and not only have you just been putting your focus and attention on everything that's going to go away anyway, you also done some bad things in the process, because in the moment it can seem so important to make that deal or get something, that you've got these karmic inhibitors. Whereas if we really look at our virtue, really live to the highest degree of purity as we can and purify the mind, then we can really move through life and all of its challenges with a kind of steadiness, with a bit more lightness and happiness, like Ajahn Ganha, being happy in the present moment. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Sati, really using them. There's this verse at the end: worldlings subject to illness, old age, and death are disgusted by other people who exist in accordance with their nature. So we find it disgusting when we see people who are ill or old, dead bodies. And if we were to become disgusted with beings who have such a nature, that would not be proper for me. This is what the Buddha said. This is really what caused the Buddha to want to find the way out. Since I have that nature, it wouldn't be proper for me to be disgusted by someone else who's going through that. While I was dwelling thus, having known the state without acquisitions, I overcame all intoxications, intoxication with health, with youth, and with life, having seen security in renunciation, all acquisitions, taking anything to be me or mine. If we can let that go, what freedom, what relief. Zeal then arose in me as I clearly saw Nibbana. Now I am incapable of indulging in sensual pleasures, relying on the spiritual life. Never will I turn back. That's what the Buddha said. So, I don't know if that's the bridge that we needed to bring this really solidly into our practice, into our daily life and reflection. But I hope it helps. And I hope there's an ability to see the beauty of it, the real power of it, the real freedom that it leads to.